So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the first concept, that of theory of change. Right. So when we're talking about theory of change, what is it that we're talking about? Well, one way to think about it, it's the general expected outcomes of an initiative. The other part of that definition that I really like, it's that it's the project's hypothesis or what outcomes will be achieved and how. So one way to think about theory of change is in a very simplistic standpoint of what you're going to do and what are you going to get, right? So what will you do and what will you get? So essentially what you're saying is, if we do this, then we will get, etc., that. And so the first step in terms of formula is that you want to be able to summarize the theory of change in a sentence. You want to be able to condense down what you're thinking about the project and really being able to have a sentence around that theory of change. So let me walk you through a couple examples and show what that looks like. So in this first example, this is a Department of Ed project that we are working on. It's funded through the Undergraduate International Studies and Foreign Language program. And the project's theory of change basically asserts that if the Global Studies program at this particular college is created, then students will be better able to think critically about pressing global challenges and better prepared for postgraduate or a professional career. So we have our if portion and then our then portion. Here's another example. Again, this is a Department of Ed minority science and engineering improvement grant that we would consider a moderate size grant. And in this project, the project is kind of posits that if early academic assistance through professional and premier mentoring supported by networks that remove non-academic barriers are provided, then there will be increased student performance, graduation, and STEM workforce rates. And so let me wrap this portion up with an example from a large scale. And this is the DOE TAACCCT grant that many community colleges were participating in. And in this theory of change, we wrote it this way. The theory of change undergirding this project is that if TAA eligible workers, veterans, and other workers are provided an opportunity to quickly advance their credentials in a field with job openings, in this case as a mechatronics technician or industrial machinery mechanic, then participants will increase their earnings and employability. So you can see that in three different types of examples with three different really types of potential complexity, that there was this attempt to really be able to distill what the project is doing down to a sentence. And that's the first piece of the formula in terms of writing an evaluation plan. So let me pause there for a moment and ask Elise, are there any questions that have been posed?
Yes. What if you can't summarize the project in a sentence?
That's a really good question. So if there's a challenge in terms of being able to condense down the project in a sentence, I often think that may cue that there may be more distillation of the project, more clarity around the understanding what the doing part is and the then part afterwards. It reminds me of, I was working with a project team a couple of months ago in a project narrative and was going through the draft, draft of the proposal, and I was having a really hard time drafting out what that theory of change was in a sentence, and got on the phone with the PI and had some additional kind of clarifying questions. And when he shared with me what the then was, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. That's really reflected in what the narrative is. So making sure to go back and pepper that into the narrative. And so that's, sometimes if you can't get it down to a sentence, it really kind of cues that there may be something kind of challenging that you may want to address. Okay. Were there any other questions?
Yes. When you're talking
Okay.
about funding, is this funding for the evaluation or for the project itself?
When I'm talking about that amount per year, I'm talking about the entire for the project overall. So I'm not talking. So when I say $100,000 a year, I'm talking about overall for the project, not what's allocated for the evaluation. Right.
Thank you, Lana. That's all the
Right.
questions at the moment.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's go ahead and go on to the next portion.